On April 16, 2018, a courtroom in Fulton County, Ohio fell silent as Judge Jeffrey Robinson looked at James Dean Worley and spoke words that would seal his fate. There would be no mercy, no hesitation, no ambiguity. Worley, you are sentenced to death. Gasps rippled through the room. Sierah Joughin's family collapsed in grief. Cameras flashed. Worley did not react. He stood still, eyes forward, already disappearing from the world outside those walls. But what happened next is the part no one saw coming. The execution never happened. Instead, Worley was sent to death row at Chillicothe Correctional Institution in southern Ohio, and 7 years later, he is still there. Same cell, same routine, same clock ticking without an end, because Ohio has not executed a single inmate since July of 2018, the same year Worley was condemned. The state's lethal injection system unraveled, court battles stacked up, and death row quietly transformed into something far more disturbing than execution: a sentence without an ending. A life suspended in permanent limbo. Stay with me until the end, because I will reveal what psychologists call the torture of uncertainty, and why even Sierah Joughin's own family is divided over whether this endless waiting is justice or cruelty. But to understand how James Worley ended up here, you need to know one thing, because the story did not begin with Sierah Joughin alone. July 4, 1990. White House, Ohio. Robin Gardner was 26 years old, riding her bicycle along Obie Road on a quiet summer evening. It was the kind of road where nothing ever seemed to happen. Trees lined the pavement. Fields stretched outward. The air was warm and still. A pickup truck passed her going in the opposite direction. She barely noticed it. Seconds later, the truck returned. This time it came from behind. It struck her with enough force to knock her and her bicycle into a ditch. The driver stopped. He got out. He asked if she was all right. Then he raised a hammer and struck her in the back of the head. The blow fractured her skull instantly. Before Robin could fully understand what was happening, the man wrapped an arm around her neck and forced her into a chokehold. He pressed a screwdriver against her throat. He told her to get into the truck or he would kill her. His name was James Dean Worley. He was 31 years old. Worley dragged her toward his pickup and shoved her into the passenger seat. He pulled out a set of handcuffs and locked one around her right wrist. Then he tried to force her other arm behind her back. Robin resisted. She reached for the steering wheel and held on. She understood something in that moment with terrifying clarity. If he managed to restrain both of her hands, she would not survive. They struggled inside the cab of the truck. Time stretched. Then something unexpected happened. A motorcyclist came down the road and saw the struggle. He stopped. Robin forced the door open, fell out of the truck, and ran. She screamed for help. She told him the man was going to kill her. The motorcyclist drove her home and contacted police. James Worley was arrested that same night. Robin Gardner spent 3 days in the hospital recovering from her injuries. She survived. Worley was charged with abduction and sentenced to 4 to 10 years in prison. He served just 3. In 1993, James Worley was released. There was no public alert, no electronic monitoring, no meaningful supervision. He returned to his property on County Road 6 in rural Delta, Ohio. It was a quiet piece of land with a barn sitting behind the house. To neighbors, he appeared unremarkable, a man who kept to himself. What no one knew was that the barn would become the center of his world. Over the next 23 years, James Worley lived with a single purpose. He waited, he planned, he prepared. Sierah Joughin was 20 years old. She was a University of Toledo student, an athlete, a daughter, a friend. She loved riding her bicycle through the countryside near Metamora, Ohio. On the evening of July 19, 2016, she rode to her boyfriend Joshua Kolasinski's house. Around 6:45 p.m., she began the ride home. Joshua followed alongside her on his motorcycle for part of the way. Then they separated near County Road 6. He turned back. She continued. She never made it home. Within hours, her family knew something was wrong. Joshua and Sierra's mother, Sheila Volchik, began searching. They contacted police. Around 7 o'clock that evening, a farmer found a motorcycle helmet lying along County Road 6. There was blood on it. Later that night, deputies discovered Sierra's bicycle hidden several rows deep in a cornfield. There were tire tracks cutting through the dirt, signs of a violent struggle, blood, an orange-handled screwdriver. Within 48 hours, investigators had a suspect. The helmet belonged to James Worley. DNA testing confirmed it. On July 22nd, 3 days after Sierah disappeared, police executed a search warrant on Worley's property. Inside the barn, they found a hidden room. Restraints bolted to the walls, zip ties, duct tape, a freezer, women's underwear, traces of Sierah's DNA. Later that day, her body was found buried in a shallow grave less than a mile away. The autopsy revealed she had been gagged with a dog's squeaky toy, forced into her mouth with enough pressure to break a tooth. Then it was tied in place. Sierah suffocated slowly while James Worley watched. There was no evidence of sexual assault. This was about control, a fantasy decades in the making. This time, the victim did not escape. James Worley's trial began in March of 2018 at Fulton County Common Pleas Court. 400 potential jurors were summoned. In a county of just 42,000 people, finding anyone untouched by the case was nearly impossible. Nearly everyone knew the name. Nearly everyone knew the details. The prosecution presented evidence that left little room for doubt. DNA, blood, fibers, the hidden room, the restraints, and perhaps most damning, Worley's internet search history from July 19, 2016 in the hours leading up to Sierah Joughin's abduction. James Worley had been watching videos depicting young women being bound and strangled. He was not acting on impulse. He was preparing himself. Robin Gardner testified about her 1990 attack. The similarities were unmistakable. Both victims were young women. Both were riding bicycles on rural roads. Both were attacked in July. Both suffered head injuries. Both were restrained. Both involved a screwdriver. The defense argued the items in Worley's barn were part of a business venture, that his motorcycle had broken down near the crime scene days earlier, that he had never met Sierah. The jury rejected those claims. On March 28, 2018, after less than 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned guilty verdicts on 17 counts and recommended the death penalty. On April 16, 2018, Judge Jeffrey Robinson imposed the sentence. Before sentencing, Worley spoke for 45 minutes, claiming he had been framed and that someone else had killed Sierah. The judge responded without hesitation. He said Worley's resolve to murder Sierah Joughin far outweighed any mitigating factors. He said if there were even a snowball's chance in hell that Worley was innocent, he would be looking at life in prison. But he was not innocent. The death penalty was upheld. James Worley was transferred to Chillicothe Correctional Institution on April 19, 2018. Inmate number A743593. His execution date was set for June 3, 2019. That date arrived and passed. James Worley remained alive 0.3 months after Worley was sentenced. Ohio carried out its final execution. Robert Van Hook was put to death in July of 2018. Since then, the state has executed no one. Ohio's lethal injection protocol collapsed as pharmaceutical companies refused to supply the necessary drugs. Legal challenges mounted. Court rulings delayed every attempt. Gradually, Ohio found itself unable to carry out executions at all. Currently, 113 inmates sit on Ohio's death row. They have all been sentenced to die. None of them are dying. They are waiting. Worley's execution was rescheduled for May 20, 2025. But in 2021, the Ohio Supreme Court issued a stay of execution. That stay remains in effect. No one knows when or if it will be lifted. This is where the punishment takes on a different form. Death row inmates live in a state of perpetual anticipation. They know the state intends to kill them. They do not know when or if. Psychologists describe this uncertainty as one of the cruelest aspects of modern capital punishment. For James Worley, it means waking up every morning not knowing if this is the year he will die, or if he will simply grow old inside a concrete cell. Unlike other inmates, death row prisoners in limbo cannot hope for parole. They cannot hope for transfer. They cannot hope for clarity. They exist in suspension, neither fully alive nor dead, just waiting. James Worley lives alone in a single occupancy cell at Chillicothe Correctional Institution. The cell measures approximately 80 square feet. Inside, there is a concrete bunk with a thin mattress, a stainless steel toilet and sink combination, a small metal desk. There are no photographs, no decorations, no personal items. The fluorescent lighting remains on for 23 hours a day. Worley spends 23 hours every day inside that cell alone. He is allowed 1 hour of recreation. Not in a yard. In a small outdoor cage surrounded by chain link fencing topped with razor wire. He can walk.
Допущи UPS.
Look at the sky. Then the hour ends. Showers are permitted every other day for 5 minutes. He is escorted in full restraints. Handcuffs, waist chain, leg shackles. A correctional officer stands nearby. Meals are delivered through a slot in the cell door. Breakfast at 6 a.m., lunch at 11. Dinner at 4 p.m. The food is bland, designed for efficiency, not enjoyment. Phone calls are limited and monitored. 1 call per week, 15 minutes maximum. Every word is recorded. Visitors are rare. Worley's family has largely distanced themselves. His property was awarded to the Joughin family and demolished. Mail is screened. Every letter is read. Every package inspected. His world has shrunk to 80 square feet. Same walls, same ceiling, same floor, same routine, day after day, year after year. For 7 years, this has been his existence. If Ohio's execution moratorium continues, it may be his existence for decades more. Psychologists emphasize that it is not the physical conditions that destroy death row inmates. It is the psychological weight. Every morning, James Worley wakes up knowing the state has decided he should die. But he does not know when. That uncertainty becomes its own form of torture. Dr. Craig Haney explains that death row kills you repeatedly without ever delivering the final blow. For someone like Worley, whose crimes revolved around power and control, this loss of autonomy is devastating. He once controlled his victims. He controlled the construction of his hidden room. He controlled the circumstances of Sierah Joughin's death. Control defined him. Now he controls nothing. Not when he eats. Not when he sleeps. Not when he showers. Not even when he dies. There is also social death. No job. No programs. No education. No therapy. No future. He exists in isolation. A man erased from society while still breathing. Former death row inmate Derek Jameson described it as being frozen in time while the world continues moving forward. That is James Worley's reality. Sierah Joughin's family has remained vocal throughout the process. Her mother has said that every day Worley breathes is a day her daughter does not get back. Their grief led to action. Sierah's law was passed in December of 2018, creating a searchable database of violent offenders. A law that might have saved Sierah's life if it had existed earlier. James Worley remains on death row. Alive. Waiting. Whether this existence is worse than death is a question with no simple answer. What is certain is that Sierah Joughin lost everything. And James Worley still wakes up every morning. James Dean Worley remains alone in an 80-square-foot cell at Chillicothe Correctional Institution. 7 years into a death sentence that has no calendar and no certainty. He wakes to concrete walls, eats identical meals, steps into a cage for 1 hour, returns to the cell and repeats the cycle. No milestones, no movement, no future to imagine. This is his existence until Ohio resumes executions or until his body gives out first. And the question that refuses to fade is simple but unsettling. What is worse? A sentence that ends life in a single moment, or a sentence that stretches it into decades of waiting, eroding the mind piece by piece? There is no clean answer. Maybe there isn't supposed to be. Justice is rarely neat. It doesn't always feel balanced. And sometimes it forces us to confront whether punishment has crossed into something else entirely. What we do know is this. Sierah Joughin was 20 years old when her life was stolen. She had plans, relationships, a future that was still unfolding. James Worley took all of that away. Whether his current punishment is worse than execution almost misses the deeper truth. Because unlike Sierah, he still wakes up. He still breathes. He still eats. He still watches days pass. She never gets another morning. She never gets another choice. And that difference may be the only certainty left in this case. Now I want to hear from you. Is permanent waiting a harsher sentence than death itself? Or does finality remain the ultimate punishment? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every one. If the story made you think, tap like and subscribe for more cases that challenge how we define justice. Thank you for watching. Remember, justice is complicated, and the truth rarely gives us comfort. Sometimes the hardest stories matter most because they force us to sit with questions without answers for a while.